You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
This episode is brought to you by Prime. What if you had one more chance with the one that got away?
Sam.
You came home.
Based on the best-selling novel from Carly Fortune. Every Year After follows childhood friends Sam and Percy as they reunite in the dreamy, nostalgic lakeside town of Barry's Bay.
Love can be hard to find. So if you're lucky enough to find that person, never let go.
A second chance at first love. Every Year After, now streaming only on Prime.
You have one new message. Translating. Disney and Pixar's Hoppers is now available on Disney+.
You could say that again.
Critics are calling it Pixar's funniest movie ever and a wildly entertaining ride. Blizzard Potato. It's certified fresh and verified hot.
Now we party.
This is incredible!
Wow, I am clearing the rest of the day.
Disney and Pixar's Hoppers, now available on Disney+. Rated PG.
I decided Aphrodite would know her way around.
Yes, she would.
I'm Jenny Williamson.
And I'm Jen McMenemy.
And this is Ancient History Fangirl. Today we are so thrilled to welcome best-selling author of Ariadne, Electra, Hera, Atalanta, and now This Immortal Heart, the story of Aphrodite, Jennifer Saint, onto the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much for having me back a fifth time.
Oh, we are so delighted to have you. This is so much fun. We love talking to you about this stuff. And yeah, it has now been 5 books. Oh my goodness.
In 5 years.
5 books in 5 years.
And each one I love more than the last. Like, it just warms my heart. This one that we're going to talk about, guys, it's so good. It's so good. And we get to see my friend Dionysus again, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
So, you have now covered quite a few women, goddesses, heroines from Greek mythology. Why did you choose Aphrodite for your next subject? What drew you to her story?
So, it's a book that I said a couple of years ago that I was definitely never going to write. So
that's always what we say, and then that book comes and gets you.
That's how it goes.
Right. So it completely took me by surprise. I'd said that I wasn't going to write romance in this mythological space because I just didn't feel that there were any healthy models of romance in the ancient world that I could call upon. So I think somebody actually asked me that question at an event. Oh, would you switch? Would you start writing romance? And I was like, absolutely, definitively not. And then somehow, and I don't know where this one came from, it just crept into my head, this idea of actually, what about Aphrodite and Ares though? What about their relationship? Wouldn't that be a good story to tell? And I mentioned it to my agent and she was like, yes, the goddess of love, falling in love with the god of war. You have to do it. Like, she was so excited. And I had 2 ideas, and I'm not going to talk about the second one because that's maybe coming later. But I didn't want to start with Aphrodite. I was really apprehensive because it is, we mentioned it's a different kind of title this time. I've moved away from I didn't call it Aphrodite after the protagonist because I wanted to signal this is a shift in genre, in subgenre, I guess. This is my kind of move into writing romance. And I was really intimidated because, as you both know, writing romance is hard to do and it's hard to get it right. And I so wanted to do that justice and to be able to tell a love story that did feel healthy, and in particular that felt healthy for women to read and experience.
Yeah, and this is so fun for me because Jen and I both read romance, we write romance, we live and breathe romance. I wanted to ask you more about that. What was it like switching to that genre, and what was the biggest challenge for you?
So I think the biggest challenge was to be really wary of falling into toxicity. It is amazing how easy that is to do, to accidentally write a romance that feels, when you actually step back and look at it, you go, oh my God, this is really codependent, or this is like, he is really terrible. And I'm accidentally reinforcing these horrific patriarchal norms. And it particularly because Ares is the god of war, I felt there was a lot of scope to kind of make him really violent and like, oh, isn't he so sexy because he's responsible for destruction and death? And in fact, that's not what is appealing about Ares. Ares is a romantic hero. He's actually so much more appropriate than the other Greek gods. I mean, this was the problem really when it came to writing romance in Greek mythology. You're like, where are the decent men? Nowhere. But you can amazingly find it in Ares, who stands for one of the most toxic and destructive things that you can stand for. You know, his domain is the most horrendous in so many ways. And yet, as a god, when you see him in mythology, he is the only male god who is never implicated in the sexual assault of a woman. He is the only god who actually respects the idea of consent.
As Ares, not as Mars. The Romans make him very different.
Yeah, I'm very strictly in just the ancient Greek. But yeah, as Ares, his like main act of violence against an individual, rather than, I suppose you'd say, like collectively, the violence of war, is when he punishes a rapist. So I felt that the bar is low. You know, we are starting from a model of male behaviour that is not good, but Ares clears that bar. And so he seemed like the perfect hero. And I thought perhaps it was finally time to write a decent man into one of my novels. I really enjoyed writing Ares. There is just in the UK, but there is an exclusive edition coming out with Waterstones where there's a chapter from Ares' point of view. So it's the first time I've ever written from that male perspective. And he's so brooding and he's so yearning.
I love a slow burn and I love the yearning. Very hot.
Yeah, it was all about the pining. That was my whole intention with this novel, to write a novel with as much pining as I could possibly get in.
So for the listeners, what would you say the heat level of this book is? And how do you feel about writing sex scenes?
Okay, so I'm going to say if I'm measuring it by your standards, Jenny, I've read your novel. I'm extremely mild. And I'm kind of a fan of the fade to black.
That's fair. Closed Doors got a good place. I'm here for it.
But I mean, I'm writing Aphrodite, and she is the goddess of sex and love. So the sex scenes were really, really important for me to get right. And I guess it's like the complexity of writing dialogue and the complexity of writing like a different kind of action scene, like a battle scene or a fight scene or something, both of them combined, because it has to be about this communication between the two of them. It has to be about where it takes them in their relationship to one another and kind of what is changing. So every kind of action, every movement has to be intentional and has to be specific. So, I mean, I'm making it sound really not sexy now because I'm like, I thought about it so carefully. But you also have to make it feel instinctual and natural and kind of the way that these characters are. And when it comes to writing somebody like Aphrodite, she is so in charge of herself and she is so in touch with her own body and her own desires that she felt like a positive kind of heroine to write these sex scenes with.
Yeah, and I think like one of the things that I liked is, yes, there's some fade to black, but the sex scenes that you have in here are important. And because she's the goddess of love and sex and all that, you know, you could just write a book that is literally just sex scenes, right? Like, because that is her domain. And I think the way you've chosen to show that and use the scenes for intimacy and to show this character development and romance she has works so incredibly well. So yeah, I think you really walk that line really well. And it is sexy. Like,
oh, thank you. Yeah.
I know you're a little worried you downplayed it. It is. It all works.
Yeah, and I think that is really important too. Like, that's definitely something that I found when I was writing my book. Like, a sex scene is a conversation. A battle scene, a fight scene is a conversation. Each one of them has to advance the plot to a certain point or like advance the intimacy or throw up a roadblock. And it is definitely fun to sit down and think of the most out there sex you can possibly think of. That is a joy that I have. Although I would say that I've definitely read a lot kinkier sex scenes in some books than my book. But I think it's so much fun. And I think it's really fun to like excavate our characters' desires and contradictions in those settings, you know?
Yeah, I think it's when they are really so much themselves and so much like, excuse the pun, but like stripped bare emotionally as well. It is really revealing of who they are and how they feel. And I just think I really like the way that you handled it all in your novel, which like is a few notches up on the spice level. But I have read books where you just think, I am so busy trying to figure out the logistics of this and the anatomical complexity that I'm out of the whole mood. I'm kind of like, I've lost what's happening, and I'm just like having to draw diagrams and work things out. It removes you from the reading experience.
Absolutely. And I taught myself how to write sex scenes via teaching myself how to write fight scenes in a way, because I had been trying to write sex scenes since long before I actually had sex, like since high school. Not that I was good at it, but I didn't really know how to write a fight scene for a while. I taught myself in Enemy of My Dreams. And the way I learned how to do it was I was watching anime. I got super into anime that are like, have a lot of sword fights and things like that. And some of the anime, you see every move that happens. And like, they clearly had to like animate it very precisely and like know what people do when they have a fight with a sword, like how that works. And then there are some where two people just run at each other and you see a bunch of swords flashing and then somebody's torso falls off. And I'm just like, oh my God, I can just do that. I can just do that. I can just sort of wing it about where the bodies are and focus more on the emotions. And that seems to have worked for people, because I am getting feedback that the fight scenes worked and that the sex scenes worked. By extension, I was like, I don't have to worry too much about where her arm is in this moment. Like, that's not the most important thing.
Exactly. Like, I think I got really hung up on figuring out Ares' armor. I was like, but how does it come off? How do you take armor? I'd never considered this.
Magic.
This is where I landed. But I was reading these articles on military history and all kinds of things, and I was like, nobody is trying to get these warriors undressed at any point. Why am I reading this? It is not helpful. I called Elodie Harper and I was like, Elodie, do you know how to undress somebody who's wearing armor? I just thought you might. You've written about Romans. She didn't.
You could call me. Super depends on what kind of armor it is. And let me tell you what, if he's wearing chainmail, okay, does not come off easily. I watched a whole YouTube video on how you get chainmail off yourself. This is like what the Celts and the Gauls would have worn, right? You would need help. And I have a scene where Alaric takes his chainmail shirt off and it's very fast and he just kind of takes it off, because I was just like, I don't think anybody's going to be tracking down the same YouTube videos that I have, and this just really slows down the scene if this is like a problem for him to get this chainmail tunic shirt off.
This is the conclusion I came to. In the end, I was like, you know what? Aphrodite's going to unbuckle it, and I don't need to explain every single aspect of how she does that, because we're more interested in what happens when the armor comes off.
Absolutely. And I always say to Jenny when stuff like that happens, because she'll call me, I'm her Elodie, and she'll call me and be like, what do we do? I'm like, I don't care. So your reader probably isn't going to, this is something that's wrapped around your axle, but really it doesn't matter. Like, I'll tell you if it matters, but like nobody cares. What they care is what happens afterwards. So that's a point where if you're going to cut or fade, armor on the floor, you're done. Nobody needs to know.
I have a fade to black when it comes to like how we take off our very involved armor.
Exactly. You want to get to the stuff that actually matters to your readers. And this is like 90% of the research you do for anything, any historical novel. It ends up on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, you have to know it so that like if somebody asks you about it, you can explain why you did what you did potentially. But like honestly, most readers aren't that interested unless it's really integral to the plot, or unless like it's character building. Like I do see a lot of sex scenes and fight scenes as places to build character, and I can see like a really funny moment where you're trying to unbuckle this armor and you can't unbuckle the armor, and you're having this humor and this like human intimacy, and it's more like kind of young lovers or whatever, but like between a god or like Jenny's Alaric or the Visigoths, like it's just slowing things down between two sort of like young star-crossed lovers who've like run away to war. It's cute.
Yeah, I decided Aphrodite would know her way around.
Yes, she would.
She knows how to undress whoever she has to undress in every situation. That's part of her power. She just blinks at you and your clothes fall off.
That's exactly it, yeah.
Hey, Jenny, is it true? Your book has actually been out for a year now?
That is, in fact, true, Jen.
Oh my God, Enemy of My Dreams is a year old.
Yeah.
Jenny, what have the people been saying about this book?
Well, I don't know because I don't look at my reviews, but a little bird told me that there have been a number of 5-star reviews, and that just makes me happy.
My favorite review that I have seen is this one.
Oh my God, are you going to read me reviews?
Quote, the best read ever. Think season 1 vibes of Outlander, but a Roman Empire. Wait. I've got another one for you. Quote, I'll be suffering from a book hangover for weeks.
I aim to please, you know?
Quote, they are enemies and attracted to each other and they hate it. That is my jam.
That's so fun. I love writing that.
So if this sounds like it might be your jam, Enemy of My Dreams is out now in hardback, ebook, and audio download, and we think you should check it out.
Available wherever books are sold.
The new LinkedIn Hiring Pro can't undo your last hire. The lone wolf, who you thought was a good collaborator because you didn't have the right candidate insights. But once you hired them, it was all hoarding info, declining meetings, and howling at the full moon? But LinkedIn Hiring Pro can go deeper than just the resume to find you a perfect fit. By using insights from the LinkedIn network to give you a short list of best fit candidates. Hire right the first time with LinkedIn Hiring Pro. Post a free job today at linkedin.com/quality.
Study and play come together on a Windows 11 PC. And for a limited time, college students get the best of both worlds. Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
So, what makes Aphrodite different from the goddesses, heroines, whose stories you've taken on before, like from a character perspective?
So Aphrodite, I would say that actually kind of the main thing about her was that I felt like this was a novel where I was not exploring tragedy in the same way that I had explored it before. Aphrodite is so much about joy and about happiness. It was really, really refreshing to take her on. I really liked with Aphrodite, you know, my favourite myth of Aphrodite is her birth from the castration foam of Uranus. That she emerges into the world because the sky is literally unmanned. And I'm so fascinated by what you get from that, along with kind of the Furies and these giants that arise, these kind of much more violent, much darker creatures that come from this act of violence. You get this beautiful goddess striding fully formed out of the ocean. And she ends up representing love and beauty. And there's like a paradox, isn't there, that she is everything that the patriarchy wants her to be, but then she arose from castration. There is that hint of subversion within her from the very, very beginning, that actually she has got the tools to undo you. You might think that you can possess her and that you can control her, but you really should not lose sight of the fact that Aphrodite is more ancient, more powerful, and much cleverer than she's given credit for. I found the idea of her being diminished in a different way to Hera. So when I was writing Hera, I was interested in the way that the patriarchy looks at Hera probably as like an older woman, as a wife, as somebody who is very bitter and shrewish, and you kind of diminish her power by making her petty and spiteful. And with Aphrodite, the attempt to diminish her is to try and present her as vapid, trying to present her as like a kind of vacant airhead. And that's not who she is at all. And you can see it traced right back to the very beginning of Aphrodite. I just was really captivated by this image of her striding out of the foam. And she's ready to go. She has no childhood. She has no parents. So she is very much her own entity right from the very start. And that separated her from the Olympian gods. It makes her in a category all by herself. And that made her just such an incredibly appealing character to take on. But so unlike the others, because I think what I had to be really careful of was that if you're presenting somebody really beautiful, somebody really capable, somebody who kind of has so much figured out in so many ways, that you don't want to then alienate your reader from that character. So it was kind of finding the humanity and finding the points of vulnerability within Aphrodite that would feel relatable. And there is nothing more relatable than the experience of love. Every single person has known that feeling, reciprocated, unreciprocated. Everybody knows what love is like. So she is kind of universally extremely relatable, as well as being completely unique and completely separate.
It is so fascinating. And it's so fascinating that you describe her as a subversive character, because I've always seen her as a subversive character in that way, you know, because she's not the goddess of marriage. She's the goddess of love. And one of the things about her is that she makes gods, people around her, fall in love with people that they should not be falling in love with, right?
So I know that you've always considered her a subversive character because I listened to your episodes on Aphrodite for research. And I mentioned that in the author's note. Yeah, I really found that so helpful in illuminating listening to the two of you talk about Aphrodite and the ways in which you can see her standing for all kinds of love as well. You know, her relationships. So I'm obviously, this one is about her romance with Ares. It's a heterosexual relationship, but in your episodes, you really explored the way that Aphrodite represents love for everybody. And it was really important to me to get that into the book, even though the primary relationship is between Ares and Aphrodite. I wanted to really demonstrate that she is a goddess of love for all kinds of people and all kinds of love. With the question of her subverting the structures of power by making people fall in love with people that they shouldn't, or kind of stoking up this desire for people that they couldn't. That was actually probably the part that I found the most challenging, because that's all very well in an ancient context when we've got that distance and remove. When you are writing the novel and it's first person and you are writing this in the 21st century, there are all these issues around consent and agency that suddenly bubble up in a way that I think when I was sketching out how this book was going to go, her playing with people's desire was a really central focus. And that was something I discussed with my editors, where we realized, actually, I don't want her at this point to make Zeus inflamed with desire for this nymph or whatever, because Zeus is going to assault her, and then Aphrodite is going to be complicit in that. Or if Aphrodite makes a woman fall in love with somebody that she wouldn't, are we in some kind of weird spiking people's drink kind of, are we in this kind of really uncomfortable realm that actually you don't want to go into as a modern reader? So that was something that I really had to grapple with. How is Aphrodite going to be the goddess of love, but also respect people's consent and autonomy, bodily autonomy, which I figured would be crucially important to her because she is the goddess of pleasure. And so therefore, it's really, I think enthusiastic consent is going to be one of the pillars of her philosophy, honestly. So I had to kind of make sure that was part of the novel as well.
I think that the lens that we look at Aphrodite's actions through has to be the modern lens, because we are people from the modern world. But I always saw Aphrodite as a figure illustrating that love and desire couldn't live outside of a consensual framework, because of the way her relationship with Hephaestus worked, a relationship that Aphrodite fundamentally didn't want to be in. And that's the one partnership she had where she didn't have children. In the ancient world, having children with someone was kind of proxy for how good your marriage was, whether you were having sex, whether you connected, all of that stuff. So she's the goddess of love and sex. She sleeps with, lots of different people. She didn't sleep with her husband. Her powers don't function in the presence of someone she doesn't want to be with consensually, right? So I kind of always saw her in that way.
That's where I came out, basically, that actually those predatory actions, they don't have anything to do with love or desire in the sense that Aphrodite governs it. So they are in a separate realm from hers. That is something completely different as far as I was concerned.
Think in the mythology, the fact that, Aphrodite gets blamed for everyone's lustful thoughts really does eventually come down to her, let's call it, unhappy marriage. We'll get there in a bit. But I do think that, part of her being this single woman, she gets a lot of blame for stuff that I don't necessarily know that she did stoke Zeus to fall in love with a nymph. I think Zeus just liked to blame someone for his actions, if he could.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. And that was how I saw her and how I understood her. I think it was the process of kind of figuring that out on the page, how to convey that and how to make it clear that she's not going around meddling in people's desires in that kind of tricksy, mischievous way. That's actually what she's doing is something much more profound and much more important. She's not just going around kind of messing with people's minds and making them do things they don't want to do. That is just, again, another diminishment of a female realm, of a goddess's domain.
Yeah, and if you look at the way goddesses' stories are told in ancient Greece, like Athena's always siding with these heroes who do these awful things, and like the way Hera is always siding against the women that Zeus assaults. Things like that, where you see goddesses and heroines sometimes making these very shady decisions and essentially functioning as an arm of the patriarchy. You can kind of see how these stories were recrafted to reinforce a certain narrative, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we are always trying to unpick and always trying to challenge.
And that's why these stories are so important. So we're gonna come back to Hephaestus, trust me. But before we get there, I've got like a little lead up. Let's talk about some of Aphrodite's other lovers, because she does have a lot of lovers besides Ares and Hephaestus. Which did you enjoy like writing about? And do you have any favorite lovers or love affairs that Aphrodite had from like little known stories that you were excited that you got to include in this book? Like the deep cuts, the B-sides.
So there is the Easter egg of Aphrodite at the very start. We see her with a lover called Neretes, who is a sea god, like a minor god of the sea. There is a whole myth about Neretes and Aphrodite, and it exists in the first draft of the novel. It was something that got cut that I missed desperately. But the story is that Aphrodite has an affair with this god of the sea. He's like the god of shellfish. And she's completely like head over heels for him. And she asks him to come up onto Olympus and be her consort. And he either turns her down, or there is some kind of competition between her and Poseidon for the affections of Neretes. And she is so furious that she turns him into a shellfish himself. He becomes a little sea snail. And that version, it did exist in the first draft of the novel. It was how the whole thing opened. I found it just hilarious. I just think it was such a funny story, but it did not belong in the novel overall. So I left him in as a kind of Easter egg for people who know about Neretes and know that bigger story. He appears, but he does not get turned into a snail, poor Neretes.
Isn't it, like, sad how you have to leave your darlings on the battlefield when we do this work? I know.
Well, I mean, I guess it's not a myth that casts Aphrodite in the best possible light. But yeah, I would like to believe that he did something to really deserve it.
That thing would be Poseidon. But anyway.
Exactly. It's always Poseidon's fault. This is the thing, the blame gets directed at Aphrodite, but you can usually trace it back to Poseidon.
Poseidon is like, the dark horse of the ancient Greek mythology canon. He's like low-key the most terrible.
Yeah, I am exploring that in my 6th novel I'm writing right now. I'm exploring the many and varied ways in which Poseidon is perhaps secretly the worst.
And you've written about a lot of the worsts.
You wrote about Theseus and Jason.
Zeus, I was going to say Zeus.
Oh, Zeus. So, speaking of, let's talk about Fuck Daddy Zeus. He is a huge reason for some of the conflict that we have in Aphrodite's life, because he's a very toxic dude who has a lot of indiscretions. What was it like writing about Aphrodite? We talked about this a little bit, who gets the blame for a lot of these godly indiscretions. And what did you find in her motivation around what drives her to sort of exist in this world where people kind of have a reason to scapegoat her?
Well, this is something I felt that Aphrodite and Ares have in common. It's one of they exist in these opposite realms, but there are these various things that draw them together. And one of them is that I feel that they are different from the other gods of Olympus. They occupy this other space, and they handle it in really opposing ways because they are such opposite characters. So both Aphrodite and Ares are really pitted against Zeus a lot of the time. And Ares' response to that is a lot louder and more petulant in some ways. And, he is going to like openly defy Zeus. He's going to argue with Zeus. He's going to fight with Zeus. Aphrodite, because she is the goddess of love, she has got these skills of persuasion, of charm, then I felt that the way that she was going to interact with Zeus, she's smart enough that she is not going to step out and openly defy him, but she is going to find ways to make Zeus work for her. And I wanted Aphrodite to see she's not kind of blindly falling for these traps which scapegoat her, which end up holding her accountable. She can see that the ways that these narratives are going to be crafted about her, but she keeps her eyes on what really, really matters and what's most important. And what's most important to her is the world that she rules over. She sees herself against all the other gods as being the one who is actually keeping everything going. I wanted to have a much more optimistic view of the world in this novel and kind of come back to the idea that actually love is the central binding force. Love is the most important thing in the world, and that makes her the most important goddess. And so the way that she handles Zeus, I actually found really enjoyable. I liked to have them engaged in conversations where Zeus actually does not realise that he's being manipulated, and he doesn't realise that Aphrodite is laughing at him, and he kind of gets to go about his day striding around thinking like, I'm so powerful and I'm so great at everything. And Aphrodite is getting what she wants out of that situation. And when she can't get what she wants, because she is living under patriarchy like all of us, and sometimes however much you kick against it, you cannot overcome it, she finds out what is really important, and she kind of takes the victories that matter.
Yeah, and I think one of the things about Aphrodite that I really love, and I know we've talked about in our episodes before, is she's one of the, I think, the only female goddess who for a time remains unmarried and has sexual agency and agency over herself. And that's really important because the other goddesses who are unmarried are maidens, and we all kind of know that they probably didn't mean that they didn't have sex, they just didn't have sex with men. But the reality is that Aphrodite being able to do as she pleases with her body, with her affections, even through her marriage, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is incredibly terrifying for women who are stuck in these very unhappy marriages, like Hera.
Yeah, and that does make her a scapegoat among the Olympians. It makes her an incredible threat to Zeus, to see a woman who's got autonomy and kind of can make her own choices sexually. And yeah, and threatening to Hera as well, to see that's kind of the life that she cannot lead.
Tomorrow morning is knocking. Stock your fridge now. How about a creamy mocha frappuccino drink? Or a sweet vanilla? Smooth caramel maybe? Or a white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Find Starbucks Frappuccino drinks wherever you buy your groceries.
If you've ever blasted synth beats from your boombox or burned CDs for your besties, this one's for you. As people get older, much like their music tastes, their health needs change. AG1 is the simple daily health drink designed to deliver over 75 essential daily nutrients and pre- and probiotics to support energy, digestion, and mood, so you can make the most out of every decade and dance break. Learn more at drinkag1.com.
This episode is brought to you by Perfect Bistro Cat Food. Cats, this ad is for you. Has your human ever called you picky, persnickety, choosy? If so, Perfect Bistro Cat Food is for you. With ingredients like wild-caught tuna and pasture-raised lamb, tantalizing textures, and delectable flavors that meet even the most discerning cat standards. You're not picky, you're just perfectionists. Perfect Bistro, mealtime perfection for every cat. Have your human visit perfectbistro.com.
I want to get back to this thing about Hera having feels about how Aphrodite lives her life as a ostensibly maybe single woman, or at least a woman with a lot of sexual agency, who is not bound to one husband even when she is married. And I think that's so indicative of how the ancients saw love and relationships in a certain way, how the patriarchy pitted women against each other in the past, and how it continues to do that in the present. So what did you learn about how the ancients view love from your study of Aphrodite, and what were the similarities and differences from how we view love today, in your opinion? And what about love, like romantic love, do you think was so destabilizing to people in the ancient world? Like, what is it about single women that feels so destabilizing to someone like a Hera?
Well, like, aren't we just stuck in an eternal loop and nothing ever changes? Because I feel like this is just very applicable today. It's really strange because I started writing my novels like 5 years ago when Ariadne came out, and I was on this podcast and I was saying, you know, I wrote this novel off the back of the Me Too movement. You know, like, remember when Twitter was not Nazis. And
remember when Twitter was Twitter and not X, and you could go on it and not be terrified.
Exactly. Which, by the way, if anyone has any copy of my book with my old Twitter handle in, don't go on it, because that is now a hardcore porn account. So just a reminder that, like, being a woman on the internet is just a terrible mistake sometimes. So yeah, so I felt like, that novel, I was saying, like, isn't it powerful when women speak all together? And that was the sort of motivating force behind Ariadne, which was, it was full of anger and grief, but it was about the collective power of, like, let's go back to the Bronze Age and, like, hear women's voices from then as well, while we're listening to women's voices in the 21st century. Like, let's have women speak all across time, all across cultures, all across history. And then I'm writing this novel, This Immortal Heart, kind of just 5 years later. And I feel like there is just this tidal wave of backlash against that idea, and just an alarming force of telling women to shut up, which has always existed, but you would just kind of think that it would lose traction, that it would lose some of its momentum, and it feels like it's just roaring back stronger than ever. And it feels like there is this just terrifying push towards these imagined traditional values and gender roles, which have, as far as I can see, have never been innate, have never really existed. This is, I think, when you look back at the ancient world, you can still see this is a structure superimposed onto people, like designed to bind them and hold them in place. But it is not, I think, this kind of very conservative view of women are naturally submissive and men are naturally much more dominant and providers and protectors and all the rest of it. I think when you look back into the ancient world, you might see stories existing that attempt to shape that same narrative. But you can see the holes in it, just like you can see the holes in it now. So I felt that actually looking back at the ancient view of Aphrodite, it's almost like you are kind of looking at her through this prison and you are seeing who she is underneath it all. Because just isn't it fascinating that all these goddesses did exist in the Olympic pantheon who were not married? There's immense power wielded by women, and there's the myths kind of are this framework that kind of attempts to contain it and attempts to maybe reduce it or to kind of keep it controllable. But underneath it all, you've got the fact that, yes, you have these really powerful goddesses who are responsible for so much that matters and so much that is important, and they are going out and making decisions and doing things for themselves. So I think when you look back, you just see the same attempts to stem that, I guess, and to kind of keep that boxed in and to keep it safe. But I think what always draws me back to the ancient world is the fact that there is just this humanity at the center where you can see people want their own agency and people want their own freedom, whether they are women or men. And people have always loved in so many different ways. And love has always been so very important.
Absolutely. And I've always found it so interesting that, with the exception of Aphrodite, as far as I'm aware, there might be other figures that I'm just not thinking about, but like you think about an Athena or an Artemis, like these really powerful goddesses who are also known to be virgins. And you can definitely look at these myths and pinpoint areas where it's like, well, maybe they were queer, maybe they were asexual. I'm not saying that that's wrong, but I think what I'm interested in terms of, like, if we take it face value, these were women who did not bone. And that's almost like a source of their power. It's like the myth is telling us, if you want to be a woman with agency, you have to eschew your own sexuality. You have to eschew your own sexual agency to have agency anywhere else, because otherwise you have to be ruled by a man, you have to have his children, you have to stay at home, you have to be confined to that realm. The only way to be powerful in the world is to cut off that one big part of yourself. Like, that's kind of how they box them in and make them safe, and how these very powerful women don't threaten the patriarchy as much because they're not necessarily threatening heterosexual hegemony. Except Aphrodite. Like, she's the one who doesn't fall into that mold.
Well, and I think the point of them is they're either like Artemis supposed to be like young maidens, or they kind of have a matronly severeness to them. So it's kind of this idea of sanding off the sexuality of them in general, which allows them to be safe when you factor in the idea that men can't control themselves around pretty women. I mean, the eye roll and everything. So I do think like that is part of what you're also seeing. In order to be a woman with power, you either have to be, perpetually an epic young huntress, or you have to stand off your own sexuality in order to exist in this society. And I do think that you see it in the Olympians, and then it does come down into society and how they view women.
Yeah, and of course the goddesses are a fantasy, aren't they? So it's not reflective of how women were able to live. But I just think it's suggestive of the idea that maybe there's this hint that kind of as men are telling these stories that they kind of know that women are people too.
No. No.
Of course they do. Of course they do. And some of them are smarter than them. I mean, that's why we have Athena, right? She's very, very clever. Some women are very clever, but we must put them in their place.
Aphrodite can be seen as a destabilizing goddess because she understands the truth about people's and God's desires. What was it like writing someone who essentially brings a little bit of chaos to everything she touches?
Oh, so just so much fun. So I'd come from writing Hera's unhappiness comes from the fact that she feels that she does have to operate within the rules. And well, she finds ways to rebel, but not openly. And Aphrodite, I guess, rebels much more openly just by her very nature. And I didn't really answer your question about the ways in which Hera and Aphrodite are pitted against each other. And I mean, it's just so typical that you come up against it all the time that, yes, of course, Hera, if we're looking at her as this matronly wife, that she has to look at Aphrodite as this threat, that she has to be kind of jealous of Aphrodite and find her quite frightening. But I think when I was writing Hera and Aphrodite in this novel, there is more understanding between the two of them. Hera is not very approachable to Aphrodite, and she's, I never want to kind of take away from Hera's sharpness and the things that make her so uniquely herself. But she's not looking at Aphrodite as somebody to be jealous of. And there are some moments between the two of them where Aphrodite can kind of see Hera has got more of an understanding of who she is than she might have previously thought. Hera's just very, very closed off. I'm kind of trying to like not give too many. That's not where I went. But yeah, I wanted these points of connection between the two of them where you see that they are, as goddesses on Olympus, just by default on the same side as each other, and that both of them know it. Even if they do not personally get on, they do know that ultimately they are both on the wrong side of the patriarchy, and that neither of them are happy being there.
It's so interesting the way you handled it, too. I'm always so interested in this divide between women who chose to work within the patriarchy for safety and power and, whatever else they want, and women who chose to live outside of it, and I always saw myself as someone who chose to live outside of it. Like, I'm single, I'm not married, I chose not to have kids. This is not to say that I'm like an Aphrodite, and I have a lot of friends who made different choices in their lives, and I really see both a corollary in the ancient world in terms of wives versus courtesans, and we've done a whole series on that. But I'm also interested in how we see this reflected today and how the right, specifically women on the right, conceive of women on the left and things like that. Like, it's almost a template we're still following. But I also am so interested in this framework where underneath it, these two women recognize the humanity in each other and that they're both kind of, I don't know if I want to say victims, but sort of victims of the patriarchy in a way. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, and that's exactly it. And I think that this is always the trick of the patriarchy, to kind of undermine feminism by saying, like, look the other way, look at those women who are living differently to you and see them as a threat and see them as a problem, whether you're seeing them as like childless cat ladies, or you're seeing them as like being agents of the patriarchy and conforming to those expectations. But actually, when you do that, women on both sides end up on the losing side.
Absolutely, and both stereotypes are kind of dehumanizing.
It's all about dehumanizing women.
It's about eschewing, men being able to eschew the responsibilities they have for their own actions, because it's all about women turning on other women, usually for the behavior of a man. It's like, I don't have to worry my husband's going to cheat on me if I know my husband. Like, a girl could throw herself at him and that's fine. He's not going to do that because that's who he is. But if you have that little worry in the back of your head, then you're going to excuse it because girls are horrible. And like, that's not how that works. Two people, babes.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Exactly right.
We don't need to blame Aphrodite.
Monogamy takes two. One of the things that we both love about this book is that Aphrodite has so many tough choices to make about her role in the world, about what she wants, and most importantly, about who she is. What was it like writing about a goddess of love who refuses to allow herself to be consumed by her love for others if it means losing herself?
Yes. So that was the conflict within Aphrodite, really at the very heart of the novel. And in some ways, I mean, if you kind of translate it to a modern context, kind of she is faced with choosing between her career and her relationship. And her career happens to be incredibly important to the survival of the whole world because, you know, she does a really important job. And even if she didn't, it makes her who she is. It's where she finds fulfillment and it's where she finds the truest happiness in being herself. And so, yeah, in terms of kind of writing a romance, it was not just about Aphrodite's relationship with the significant men in her life. It really was about her relationship to the role that she wants to play and what it is ultimately that is going to bring her the most fulfillment. And it's always tricky, I think, to write a goddess and to think about that character arc that she's going to go on, because the gods exist within these characteristics that define them. And there's not so much room for development within that. You kind of go, well, she's a goddess of love. So what journey is she going to take through that? Because that's what she is at the start and it's what she is at the end. So I really thought about Aphrodite as somebody who, as the goddess of love, her vulnerability there, her kind of the trap that she can fall into is to over-idealize, to over-romanticize her own life and everything within it. And that can maybe sometimes stop her from seeing the bigger picture. And that is what she has to learn to do throughout the novel. And that does not involve trivializing the importance of love. It doesn't involve at any point her thinking like, oh, this doesn't matter as much, because it is always going to matter centrally. But she learns to, I think, to see beyond herself and her own relationships and to see what the importance of that is in the wider world as well.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because she is the goddess of love. So on the one hand, you're like, how could she not be consumed by love? Like, what else is she but love? You know, like passionate love. But like, you can't just start and end a story with that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And she has to, and she's kind of working out all the, I think as well, she thinks she can see in kind of quite black and white terms at the beginning, okay, well, she's in charge of love and that is good, and Ares is in charge of war and that is bad. And at no point in the novel am I going to say, oh, war is good, actually. But love is also damaging. Love is also dangerous. They are both in charge of realms that can cause actually catastrophic and destructive consequences. And she has to kind of recognize her own role within that as well. And she has to recognize the damage that love can do.
And I think that really there's not as much barrier between love and war as you would think, because the central organizing structure of Ares and Aphrodite, who are connected to each other so profoundly, is that they're both all about the exchange of fluids. And these passions on the battlefield, where Aphrodite springs from historically, as you know, if you listen to our episodes on this, is a history and tradition where she was the goddess of both love and war. Like, they were kind of seen as the two sides of a coin. And also you have love's role being the root of the greatest war in Greek mythology, right? Like the Trojan War. So it's not like love isn't war in a certain sense.
Yeah, they realize, they kind of start out thinking that they are opposites, and of course they come. And I think Ares realizes it a lot sooner than Aphrodite, because she wants to see herself as I think kind of occupying the moral high ground in that respect. But yeah, that he realizes that they have so much in common from that point of view. I wish that I could have included everything, because I really would have liked to have got into the Trojan War and that being all Aphrodite's fault, all Helen's fault, rather than, you know, all the men who actually fought it. But you can't cover everything in every novel.
Sadly.
Because the Trojan War was about possession and not love. But
It depends on how you define these things, Jen. I like to think it's about a woman choosing who she wants to sleep with and everyone absolutely losing their minds over that. You can interpret it however you want.
Well, that puts the blame on the woman. I think it's more about men.
Paris chooses her back, sure.
Oh, you're on my side now. That men also can be fallen apart by love.
Men can also be ruined by love, yes. But I think society is a lot more horrified by the women choosing than the men choosing, which is why I tend to harp on that.
The fault of the 1,000 ships that set off after her because they cannot bear for a woman to make her own choice. Like, her making her own choice was fine.
Absolutely.
Menelaus is not handling this breakup well. He is not.
It's okay. He's also a ginger. So, we get all the shitty roles in mythology and in history.
You guys have no souls. That might be part of it. I don't know.
That might be part of it.
Expedia and Visit Scotland invite you to come step into centuries of history that await in Scotland. Castles steeped in legend walk along cobblestone streets. Come share the warmth of stories passed down through generations. This is a place with a past that is fully present today and all yours to explore. Plan your Scottish escape today at expedia.com/Visit Scotland.
You may think you know McDonald's drinks, but you don't know them like this. From fruity refreshers like the Strawberry Watermelon Refresher and the Mango Pineapple Refresher with popping boba, to crafted sodas like the Sprite Berry Blast with berry-flavored Sprite topped with cold foam. Who knew ice-cold drinks could be so fire? 6 all-new drinks are here. Try them all, now at McDonald's. Refreshers contain caffeine.
Do you hear that? Sounds like breakfast is ready. Because Quaker's coming in hot with morning nutrition. 100% whole grain oats and a good source of fiber to fuel the rhythm of your morning and kickstart your day. And that sounds absolutely delicious. Fuel to start whatever's next. Quaker, official sponsor of FIFA World Cup 26.
What I was going to say, going back to Ares and Aphrodite, is I think one of the things that I really like about them and that sets them apart from the other Olympians, which we talked about, is they are very much of this primal, I don't want to say like base instinct, but kind of. They're of this primal thing that all humans feel, which is the ability to fall in love and to be consumed by that. And also, unfortunately, the ability to hate and go to violence over things. And I think that the reason they get each other so well, where the other Olympians, they don't get as well. These two characters, Ares and Aphrodite, they don't necessarily change in the same way that, you see other people go through character developments, because at their base core, they are a primal thing, a thing that is immutable. This fire, this passion, this spark. And that's not true for like Athena or Hephaestus or Hermes or Dionysus, who literally changes forms. I always see these two as being more compatible with each other because they are almost the same.
Yes, and in my very romantic heart, I was thinking of them. I was thinking of Ares really being the lost half of Aphrodite, that part of her that we lose at some point in that journey from the goddesses who were, like you mentioned, the goddesses of both love and war at the same time. And then she becomes just the goddess of love, and Ares is that missing part of who she always was supposed to be.
Yeah, my next question was, why do you think the story of Ares and Aphrodite is such an enduring love story, and what is it about love and war that seems to be so electric for storytelling?
So I'm completely going to steal everything Jen said when I novel later, because this is the first interview I've given about it actually, and I'm thinking, right, just remember the idea about primal forces. It sounded so good when you said it, Jen.
Jenny can send you the rough if you need it.
But it's the fact that throughout mythology they just keep coming back to one another. Aphrodite does have dozens of love affairs. Ares, not so many. He does seem to be much more loyal. Well, there's just not so many stories about Ares full stop as Aphrodite. But I think there is just something really beautiful about the fact that whatever happens, they find each other again.
It is beautiful. Oh. And for me, because I am a dark romance girly, I like them good and toxic, shovel that on me. I have no shame. I tend to be really drawn to the Hades and Persephone of it all because it is, in a way, I really see this as a story of opposites attracting. And I kind of see Ares and Aphrodite as a story of opposites attracting too, but it's also a story of two sides of the same thing attracting, which is so compelling.
It is when you turn it around. Yeah. I mean, I'm not immune to a bit of a Hades and Persephone romance myself either. But I will acknowledge that it's problematic.
Oh, same.
Oh, sure, it is. But, so is everything that I love, apparently, at this point. I have so many problematic faves, how to choose between them.
Part of the reason potentially we don't see a lot of Ares stories is one of the same reasons we don't see a lot of Hades stories. I do think Ares and Hades were these very feared gods. And if you were to tell stories about them or invoke their name in any way, you could invoke their presence and you could invoke punishment or retribution. That's my thought.
I never thought of that. That's terrifying. You just don't tell stories about Hades and Ares because they might look at you.
Yeah, well, that's why Hades is the unseen one, the Dark Prince. They didn't necessarily say his name.
But thinking about it that way, it did create more sympathy within me for Ares, because I just thought everybody needs him because everybody's going out there and fighting these wars. They want to fight the wars and they want to make their conquests and they want to kind of increase their power and all the rest of it. But they don't want to acknowledge Ares beyond what they absolutely have to. I guess they're going to make their sacrifices to him. But there are so few temples to Ares. There were so few kind of depictions of him. And sometimes it's unclear because you might see a warrior on a vase or in a sculpture, and you don't necessarily know that it's Ares, whereas the other gods are really, really identifiable. And you think it could be Ares. Maybe it's not, because he is this shadowy, feared, almost despised figure as much as he is revered. You don't want to get on the wrong side of him, but you also don't want to get too friendly with Ares. And it just made me feel really sorry for him, because it's not his fault. He is the god of war because that's what he was born to be. And then he has to carry this burden. And I love a romantic hero with a terrible burden who's also really good looking.
Swoon.
Same. And has great abs, absolutely.
Abs for days. Before we get to Hephaestus and my chronicling of questions here, we get to revisit some of my favorite Olympians, my little tricksters, Hermes and Dionysus. What was it like bringing them into this story? And we've seen Dionysus before, obviously. He's in other books. What was it like revisiting him here from the point of view of Aphrodite and their relationship?
Yes, so he is the same Dionysus, and they are all, my books are not sequential, and you will find that there are even some outright contradictions because that is mythology. But they are the same gods, they're the same characters as far as I'm concerned. I was really excited to bring Dionysus back in and not have to grapple with any of the more problematic aspects of Dionysus, but to just have him there as this foil to Ares, this temptation to Aphrodite. Because obviously Aphrodite and Dionysus have got their own myths together, their own encounters.
Their own children.
Yeah, their own children. I did not bring all the children in.
No, so many children.
But yeah, so I really enjoyed the idea that Dionysus in this novel would be such an irritation to Ares. I really like to imagine how little time Ares would have for a god like Dionysus, who just lounges around drinking wine all the time, enjoying himself. And the other side of that is how tempting that is for Aphrodite to see, and how she's going to think, maybe this is the life that I want. Maybe I just want to lie in a forest in Naxos with Dionysus, who is also super good looking and knows how to have a good time. So yeah, so he's the same Dionysus as far as I'm concerned. I really enjoyed bringing him in, and he's always there interfering with things. He's another force of chaos. He's always kind of doing what he wants to do and then seeing where the pieces fall. And he kind of has no strategy and no idea of what's going to happen, but he just knows that he wants to provoke something.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just so fun to kind of contrast them, right? Because they're so different.
Yeah, it was. It felt like a really good opportunity to actually bring some humor and some comedy into it. Yeah, Aphrodite is associated with laughter as well, and so I think to be able to write a novel where I just felt like, oh, these characters are having fun, I'm having fun writing them, people will have fun reading them, and Dionysus was the perfect conduit for that.
I think it's really fun, too, to bring a character back who was a main character in a previous book and show them from a different perspective, like a different viewpoint. Like, you learn different things about them as the writer. The readers can learn different things about them and see them in a different light. And you just kind of get to play in that little bathtub again. Like, I find that really fun.
It is. It's that multiverse that you get to occupy. It's just a really good time. And also, Elodie Harper, also a friend of the podcast and friend of mine, she has always said that Dionysus in Ariadne was like her book boyfriend, and I had to say, Elodie, he's no good for you. Like that.
That does not surprise me.
Don't return his calls. Just block him.
Exactly. And so
you deserve better.
So in this Immortal Heart, I said, here is better. Here is Ares. Here is a much better book boyfriend for you to have, Elodie. And I'm happy to report that she has transferred her allegiance and she is now all about Ares.
Dionysus is always going to be my book boyfriend, but he's so problematic.
Jen is chained to that dysfunction.
I am, unfortunately, but I do love Ares. Ares might be like my book husband. But what I was going to say that was interesting here is in Ariadne, of course, Ariadne is immortal and Dionysus is a god. So there's a lot of power dynamics at play that kind of cast him in a certain light and their relationship in a certain light. It was great to see him again when the power dynamics were different and more equal. Like, I think we got to see him be more playful and enjoy him a little more because we didn't kind of have those same power dynamics.
Yes, exactly. And in fact, kind of when Dionysus enters the novel, he's less powerful than Aphrodite because he hasn't yet got his seat on Olympus. So he's not kind of a fully fledged god, although he turns out he is still a really destabilizing force, and he does still cause a little bit of havoc in the novel. When he appears to Ariadne, it's a completely different thing to the way that he appears to Aphrodite.
So let's address the Hephaestus of it all. As we've discussed, this is not necessarily a happy marriage. What was it like telling this story? And is there a message of empowerment, at least from an ancient world perspective, in this marriage? Or is it a message of being brought to heel by the patriarchy? And how did you find your way around Hephaestus's feelings about this marriage? This is the great thing about myth, is that you can take it in either of those directions. You could tell that story either way. So the marriage to Hephaestus, this was where I really specifically came to your podcast. I went back to your episode on, all of your episodes on Aphrodite, because you did a little mini series on her. But in particular, I was really interested in your take on her marriage to Hephaestus and her infidelity with Ares, which again, a scene that I was devastated to cut, but I did have the net in the first.
I have a net scene too in my book.
But sadly, it did not survive the edit, because it did kind of descend into like a little bit of French farce at that point.
I think the myth does. That's accurate.
Well, exactly. Yeah, it was very accurate to the myth. But yeah, so one thing that I really felt in the way that you approached that part of the myth was that you did take a sympathetic approach towards Hephaestus to some extent. You did mention the fact that as a blacksmith, he would be like really muscled and really hunky. And I wanted to honor that, because I felt that, Hephaestus gets, because of his disability, he's like always mocked on Olympus, and then he's kind of treated as though he's ugly and disfigured. And actually, I did want to make it that he is handsome, and that it's not that Aphrodite doesn't think about it when it comes to Hephaestus. The problem is the issue of consent. Like, the problem is that she did not choose to marry him, and that's why that's the god that she is not going to explore anything further with, because ultimately her choice is the most important thing for her to uphold and protect. So kind of coming to the fact that I was thinking, right, so what I want to do is I want to write this romance. I want to write it from a feminist perspective, and I want it to feel healthy for women. And at the center of this is, she gets forced into a marriage that she doesn't want to be a part of. How on earth am I going to fit that into the framework that I've created for myself? So it had to be a decision that Aphrodite makes when it comes to the marriage contest. She had to decide to go ahead with honoring the result of that marriage contest. And there has to be a reason for her to do it that is not to do with just submitting, like you said, under the heel of the patriarchy. It is not about doing what Zeus wants her to do. It's about her figuring out what is going to be the best way to handle this situation. And the way that Hephaestus has approached it is to get drunk and make a really disastrous choice in chaining Hera up. The way that Ares approaches it is that he is going to get really angry and he is going to go and confront Hephaestus and try and start a war. And it's up to Aphrodite to figure out, actually, how would a grown-up handle this situation? How would we get through this and come out the other side, mostly still intact?
Yeah, this can be a marriage in name only. I play away, you play away. Doesn't have to be a whole thing.
Well, she's not going to allow herself to be shackled. Unlike Hera, who gets forced into marriage and then has to be the goddess of marriage and has to adhere very strictly by those bounds, you can't contain Aphrodite. This is the point. This is the essence of who she is. She cannot be channeled into what you want her to be. She's more chaotic than that.
Absolutely. And I love the interpretation that she isn't going to sleep with Hephaestus specifically because she was pushed to do this. Whereas if she hadn't been pushed to do this, maybe that might be on the table at some point.
Yeah, exactly. I think Hephaestus kind of has a chance, but he blows it.
Yeah, he blew it. Exactly. He blew it. I was wondering, because you describe this book as a romance and closer to genre romance than anything that you have written before, were there any romance authors that you specifically enjoyed reading, and were there any romance tropes that you were interested in integrating into this book? What was the influence of that on your work?
Yeah, so I've always read romance, and I always really loved contemporary romance. I've always really loved authors like Marion Keyes, authors like Sophie Kinsella, who really tragically died recently. I've always loved those female-focused, female-centered romance stories. And it was something that I just didn't think that I could write myself. I think because I decided to write mythology and I was in the ancient world and it felt like a very, very different kind of situation. So yes, I did feel really daunted going into it. And I was very aware of all of the kind of tropes of romance. And I was very aware of the ones that I felt like I really wanted to include and honor and kind of make romance readers feel satisfied with. And I really feel that romance is a genre that people will not appreciate the complexities of and kind of not appreciate how hard it is to write and how it's just it's something that women are reading, women are writing, therefore it's silly, therefore it doesn't matter, therefore it's easy. And it's not like that at all. So I was really aware of respecting the readership and doing my best to deliver the kind of story that they would want, whilst also making it my own novel. There are certain things that you are going to have in a romance novel. I was thinking about those and how to work them into a mythological framework that was going to feel natural, that was going to feel organic, and that was going to feel like my story as well.
Absolutely, yeah. What were some of the tropes you most wanted to honor?
I also think it's very ironic in a lot of ways that you felt this way about romance, because isn't that kind of what is put onto Aphrodite a lot, right? She's just the goddess of love. She's just the goddess of romance. And I do think the genre gets a lot of unnecessary criticism, just like Aphrodite does, for similar reasons.
Yeah, it is exactly the same. There's an exact parallel. And yeah, you were saying kind of what tropes do I really want to include? I mean, I think, as I mentioned, I really love a brooding hero. I really wanted Ares to be exactly that kind of man. Just a kind of a tortured soul. I really wanted him to have this really hard exterior, but inside he is so much softer than anybody would know, and it is him who falls in love first and falls in love the hardest. That was really important to me.
He falls first, he falls hard. That's a big one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I love that one. I mean, you just can't resist that one.
It's definitely in my book. I mean, Alaric isn't that dissimilar in a way. He's also kind of a war god. He's kind of a brooding, tortured soul in a way. He's got a very small soft spot, but he's got a soft spot for people he cares about.
Yeah, and that's it's just so appealing just to kind of, I guess it is. I mean, this is where like you veer into like, oh no, there's this really problematic, but this, this idea of like, maybe I can fix him.
Oh, sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, look, if your romance isn't a little bit problematic, are you living your life?
In real life, ladies, you can't fix him, but in fiction, yes, that's the dream. Just remember, it's got a fiction in front of it, not a nonfiction.
It's a fantasy for that reason.
Been so great to chat with you about this. This is definitely a different book, but it's so like in your wheelhouse of all your other retellings. I loved it. I think readers and listeners are going to love it and be so excited about the choices you made in this book. So yeah, we are so thrilled to have had you on the podcast. You're always a friend of the pod, always welcome back to talk myths and everything else with us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. It was so lovely to talk to you again.
So where can people find you on the internet?
So only on Instagram now, jennifer.saint.author. That is the only place you will find me.
So This Immortal Heart is out now. You can pick it up in hardback, ebook, or audio. And I really recommend that you start reading it as soon as you finish listening to this podcast.
Absolutely. The cover is absolutely beautiful, too. Just as an aside, I really loved it.
Yeah, it's the first time. It's my UK cover artist, and it's the first time that we've had the same cover in the UK and the US. So it's really something special. She has outdone herself.
Yeah, you've been blessed by the cover gods.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for that in bookstores. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you whenever we see you next.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistant's assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.